Hello everybody and welcome to this afternoon's session entitled Using Plan to Support Assessment. So firstly, I want you to be thinking about who is science assessment for? And this is going to be our first bit of interaction. So you should see on the slide this where you can go to www.menti.com, and I would like to do a shout out to Steve Marshall, who I know is here today, who advised me on how to embed this into my slides. So thank you for that, Steve. So I'd like you to go onto Menti and put in the code 727320 and put in who is science assessment for, and you should be able to put into about 5 answers. Okay, if you haven't put your answers in, do feel free to keep submitting as people are doing, but I am going to start talking around some of these points. What's coming through very strongly is that it's for teachers and children. The words get larger when people put the same answer in, and then also parents and SLT. There was appeared quite early on, I really like, and it's got quite small now, but me and us. I think that's really important, that actually if you're the people doing the assessment, it's got to be working for you. So I think whenever we're thinking about assessment, it's got to be doing something for you as teachers or us as the school community. Then we've got other things like the future teachers, government, science leaders, the pupils themselves, senior leaders. So a lot of different ideas, and all of these are people who would be interested in assessment, but for different reasons. So these are the people that I picked out, and I think you've covered all of these. Who is it for? Pupils, teachers, their future teachers, subject leaders, senior leaders, governors, parents, Ofsted, government. So all these people are really important. But what we need to think about is who is it the most important for? And I think it is those pupils, the teachers and their future teachers. That's where science is going to make the biggest impact. And then where subject leaders are using it to support them with thinking about how they can support teachers to develop science better, and then senior leaders and governors in that strategic role. And then parents, Ofsted and government tend to be using it more for information rather than it actually going to make a massive impact, although parents, of course, can make a big impact on their children's learning. So statutory assessment only takes place at the end of Key Stage 1 and the Key Stage 2 against the teacher assessment framework. So is that all that's needed? Do we just need to assess in Year 2 and Year 6, and is everybody else off the hook? I would say no, that's not the case at all. Everybody is responsible for the assessment of their science that's taking place. And one good reason is that, or a reason, is that the teacher assessment framework that the teachers in Year 2 and Year 6 have to assess against isn't basically only the topics that they'll, or knowledge that they'll have taught that year. It does draw on learning that's taken place in the previous years. So this is the first statement from the assessment framework in Year 6, and you can see there that some of it has been taught in Year 3, in Year 4 and Year 5. And it's not possible for the Year 6 teacher to reteach all of that. So we do need to rely on the fact that it's been taught really well in Year 3 or Year 4, so that knowledge has become really embedded, and the assessment backs that up. And that's what we'll talk about a little bit later. So it's important that that information is being fed through the school. Also, Ofsted have picked up on the fact that actually accurate and timely assessment is the best way for teachers to ensure that they are teaching the pupils the appropriate things. So assessment is a key thing in driving up standards and making rapid progress. Assessment is used in lots of different ways within the school. So at the bottom of this pyramid here, we've got that day-to-day ongoing assessment that teachers are doing all the way through all their lessons, and when they're marking books and when they're planning. Then that will feed into the summative judgments for the pupils at the end of the year, feeding back to parents or at the end of Key Stage. And then that feeds into the bigger school or class records that either the subject leader will be looking at the class records to see how each of the different classes are progressing, or senior leaders and governors will be looking at the school records. And then we have the sample testing that happens every other year. This would have been taking place this year. It's obviously been cancelled under the current situation. Who knows, it may be taking place next year, or it may now take place in 2 years' time. Just to reassure people that if your school is ever selected for that sample testing, somebody comes in, they deliver they take the pupils into a room, the pupils do the test, they go away again, and that is all the school knows. The data is not attached to the school, so it makes no, it has no impact on the school at all. It's just to gather data for the government's benefit. So the most important part of this pyramid is what's going on at the bottom there. It's that day-to-day ongoing formative assessment. That needs to be right. If that is solid, then the rest of the pyramid will be robust, and what's happening at the top will be reliable and trustworthy. If what's going on at the bottom is a little bit sketchy, then the data that's being passed up is not going to be of any robust nature. So that's really that bottom of the pyramid that we're going to be focusing on. So Ofsted also, in the new framework, talk about the importance of the curriculum being planned to really build on what's been taught before and towards clearly defined endpoints. And this is what we talked about last week, where the knowledge matrices can be used to support that planning. So teachers are really clear about what is it that I need to teach the children, where have they come from with that prior learning, and what don't I need to teach because it's going to be coming up in future years. So it's knowing that at the planning stage that's really important. If we've got that in our minds, then assessment becomes a lot easier. So again, I've shown this before, but this is just the traditional way of flowing through a topic. So we start with exploration, finding out where the children are, reminding them of their prior learning. And then we move on to teaching them the new content as part of the national curriculum. And that's where those knowledge matrices can really support with the planning. What I'd like to do is ask you to think about the assessment strategies that teachers that you use or other teachers in your school use to support with finding out about children's learning. What formative assessment strategies do they use, or do you use? I've put some suggestions down here. So what I'd like you to do is pick which ones of these are you familiar with and you use with your classes. If you've got something else that you do, please do click on other and then pop something into the chat so we can see that as well. So two people, Martina and Amanda, have talked about photographs, and particularly for younger children and early years. And I think that is really important. Because the children are not able to write and record things for themselves. So it is those observations. Photographs in themselves do not necessarily give us assessment information, and it is that pupil voice that goes alongside them. So it's sitting down with a pupil perhaps and asking them to explain what they were doing in that photograph. So sometimes it's about reflecting on that photograph afterwards. Ella's put in there about using voice recordings. Again, the more we can move away from this reliance on children having to write as part of the assessment, then the more we can give all children that possibility to show us that they're secure with their learning. Questioning, thank you, Sandra, that's also really important. Again, we can support children to show us what they learn by the different questions that they ask. It may be for the less able children, they need more scaffolded questions, more sort of very direct questions that perhaps have right or wrong answers. Whereas with our more able children, we want to encourage them to think more broadly. And so those open-ended questions will give that opportunity for them to think much more deeply. So Amanda's posted there about floor books for the whole class. And this may be something that other people can chip in their thoughts if you do use floor books, how you use them and what you see the benefits of them. For me, floor books have a number of different uses. So it would be for the whole class. It's a great place to store the photographs and pupils' comments, and also any bits of group work. I used to have a bottom drawer that when children were working and they'd done group work, I used to pop it in the bottom drawer because I didn't know what to do with it. And then when the bottom drawer got full, I just emptied it and put it all in the bin, which when the children came in the next day, they weren't too chuffed about. But actually that's not valuing the children's work, and also it's then gone. So it's a great place to store things that have been produced that you don't know quite where to put them. Then you can go back and revisit it. So we've got if you've taught them a particular skill and there's examples in there, you can pull the book out and remind them of that prior learning. Children will swear blind that they've never done something until you show them a photograph of them doing it, and then they'll go, oh yes, I do remember that. So it's a great way of reminding the children. It is great for your assessment because we tend to forget what we taught last week even, or what we were teaching this morning. So going back and looking at those photos and the comments is a really good way of reminding yourself. It takes you back to that lesson so you can revisit it and think about and reflect on it. So yes, I'm personally a fan of when you take it down and put another one in. And people are adding their comments there. How do you manage workload of floor books? For me, if you're using a floor book, children may not be writing in their books, so therefore you're not marking 30 books, and you can actually spend the time that you would be marking 30 books, looking through your photos, reflecting on the lesson, and actually doing some reflection and assessment on that learning. So for me, it can actually free up time. You certainly wouldn't be using the book and other things as well. Choose one or the other. Okay, thank you. If anybody has got further thoughts on floor books, please do put them into the chat. So we've taught what we need to teach, and then we need to stop, and it's this reflection. We always need to keep reflecting on what we've taught and what we think the children have learnt. If we've taught it, to a certain extent, we need to think to ourselves, I've taught it, I'm a good teacher, therefore the children should be secure. Unfortunately, we do have to recognise that although we've taught it, children will learn things differently. So we do need to spend some time actually reflecting on who do we know is secure and who do we think is not secure. And sometimes there are children that we're not sure about. There's children that don't necessarily say very much, or they don't write very much. And so we might need to just carry out a particular extra activity with those children so that we can divide them into we know they're secure or we know they're not secure. So as far as your summative judgments go, as I was saying, if you've taught it all, I would assume that all the children are secure. Then you reflect on which children do you know are not secure. And those are the ones that we should be focusing our attention on. It is our responsibility to try and make sure that as many children as possible are secure on those objectives by the time they leave us at the end of the year. So therefore, we need to think about what additional opportunities can we provide for these specific children? What would help them to gain this piece of learning or this skill that they're missing out on at the moment? So as far as making our summative judgments, it's really supportive if we know what it's going to look like. And then we can compare that with other children. And this is where the plan examples of work come into use. So each example of work takes one child's learning through an entire topic. So you've got all the work, all the activities that took place. They look a little bit like this. So you've got the child's work. If you've got the green comments, you can see there as something that the child was saying. So we're not always relying on the children's work, although because this is year 5, a lot of the work is recorded in the books, but it will be different for different children. The blue comments there are about a commentary on dear Gina's working scientifically skills, and the red comments are a commentary on her knowledge that she's developing. So teachers, the idea is that teachers look through these and then they can compare their children with this. This is only one way that a particular teacher chose to cover the unit, so there's no expectation that the same activities would have taken place, but hopefully your children would be saying or talking or demonstrating the same sort of level of understanding. So all of these can be found on the plan website. The easiest way is to go into the resources area, and then you can see all the examples of work for each year group grouped together, and they're free to download. If you are a member of the Association for Science Education, there are some additional resources on their website where we've got two children from the same class going through the same activities. And the idea is that teachers can look at these and compare them and think about how is this learning looking different for these two children. So for example, here you can see we've got Max and Molly. They've been doing the same activity. This was actually part of an art lesson where the teacher was just getting them to think about the science that they've been learning. And you can see here we've got the comments in green where the children, Max and Molly, have been talking about their work. So the idea is that teachers can look through these and make their own ideas about who do they think is secure and why do they think they're secure. Of course, we wouldn't judge a child based on one comment or one activity, so it's building up that picture over a period of time. So initially teachers would look at this unannotated version, and then they'd be able to look at the annotated version, which hopefully would back up their judgment. One of the things with assessment is teachers' confidence. You just don't know if you're doing it right. And certainly I found working with the plan team, it's really supportive discussing and talking about these things, because then you get a shared understanding, and it also builds your confidence in knowing that actually what I was saying was what everybody else was thinking. It's confidence as much as anything else that makes assessment feel difficult or feel easier. So that would support with the knowledge. With the working scientifically, I think the most important thing is that we actually ensure that we are covering everything properly. So periodically checking which skills have been covered and which haven't, what do I need to build into, is really important. And again, we need to refer back when we're doing our planning and also when we're doing our assessment, back to those working scientifically matrices, so that we ensure we are covering each of the skills in the national curriculum, and we're not just forgetting and doing our types of inquiry and not being specific about those skills, but also that we ensure that we're making sure that the children do them at the appropriate level. So they're using skills of the sufficient detail. It may be that your teachers are recording their coverage as they're doing their planning. So this particular grid, which you can download from our website, just means that teachers can tick and date which types of inquiry they're doing and also which skill they're covering. So you can see that you're covering everything adequately. Also on the plan website, there is a CPD package that you can use. I'm afraid there is a small cost, but it's only £20, so it is very minimal. But there is a resource that you can download to use with your staff. And what this does is give examples from across a whole year of a child's learning. And again, the teachers can look at the examples and discuss which skills are being taught. So for instance, in this, I've just enlarged part of it. So you can see here that in this activity, the children are expected to generate their own questions. And this was on page 14. So the idea is that teachers would work in smaller groups, focusing on one topic, and they would look through that topic and decide which skills are the children practicing. And then they can fill in a simple grid like this, for example, showing that within the plants topic, Max was asking simple questions on page 14. The idea then is that the teachers would go back and share all the skills that Max was learning across the year in those different topics, and then they can analyse which skills are being taught really well and regularly, and perhaps which skills have got a little bit neglected. So again, you get two versions of this. You get the version like this page that has got the annotations in the working scientifically box removed. So teachers first look through and make their own decisions about which skills are being covered with that particular activity. And then you get the version that has got the commentary put in. As a subject leader, if you were using this in your school, you would also get a commentary that gives you the plans team ideas on which skills are being taught in different topics. So it just means that you've got some ideas up your sleeve if people are asking questions. So we've talked a lot about these different stages of the process through your topic. So you've used the resources hopefully so that you know what it should look like. And then you can use that as part of your moderation. And that's what Jackie's just posted on the chat there. Giving teachers the opportunity to look through work together is really key. That is the only way I think that it's going to become consistent. And also it's probably the best way, as I was saying earlier, of meaning that teachers feel confident. If 3 people say the same thing as you can feel pretty confident that you're saying the right thing. So I think that's really important. Once you've done that initial part of assessment, then you can go on and provide additional opportunities, particularly for those children that need a little bit more help. You can provide some specific consolidation activities for them. And then hopefully we'll get to the end of the unit and we can then hopefully say that every single child is secure. But again, what we just need to be bearing in mind is that some children may not be secure, and we need to do our best to make them secure by the time they get to the end. Yes, I think it's really good to use these resources first, and then teachers will go through the same process with their books and moderate them with each other as well. Then it's important that I think it is important that this does get recorded in some way, partly because we do need something to remind ourselves who is secure and who's not secure, so we can go back and revisit. But also we need to pass this information on to the next teacher, and that was coming through quite strongly in what you were talking and the postings that you made earlier on in the Mentimeter. So some sort of tracking, but again, this needs to work for your teachers. It's got to work for you. It can't just become a job to do that we don't really apply our minds to. The tick sheet or whatever it is part of the process, but it's not the end point. So it needs to be simple, it needs to be manageable, it shouldn't be a massive workload. It's got to work for the teachers, it's got to work for you. So it could just be a very simple document that literally you just have the national curriculum objectives and you write a few notes on the children that are not secure. We assume everybody is secure, and then we just focus on those children that are not secure. Kasaya's just asked about what do we do with big gaps. So, I mean, obviously big gaps probably do need to be dealt with. I mean, they do need to be dealt with. But yes, the problem is that we don't necessarily have the means to provide intervention. But then I think that is where it's important to think about, what are you doing during the lessons? You're the expert, you're the teachers within this setting. So actually maybe on occasions you pull those children together and actually work specifically with those children. As also has been commented on there, invite them to a special science club so that they feel special, they feel welcomed, and then you can also help develop their working scientifically skills and focus on some of that extra piece of knowledge. So going back, we do need some sort of tracking system that is passed through the school. So it could be a Word document, it could be a simple spreadsheet like this, where you just put everybody down. If you've taught the topic, you put them down as 2, which is secure, so it goes green. And then you can again focus your attention on who is not secure, put them down as a 1 for the time being. You can add a comment in there to say why, and then hopefully by the end of the year, you'll be able to change them back to a 2 again because they've become secure. That is on our website if you would like to download that. And if you need these slides, you can add email. Bennett's just going to pop the email address so that you can get the slides and get the links from that. It could be that for working scientifically, you just use one of those grids for coverage. So this is the one from the plan resources. And what you do is just, again, you don't need to note down everybody that can do things. You just need to note down who can't do things. And then hopefully you'll be able to edit that out and then go, actually, Molly now has learned to put her results in a table so she's secure. I think the more we're focusing on the not secure children and what we can do about them, the better. Again, you could just use the coverage document and just put in who's secure and who's not. If you're trying to put lots of initials in each of the box, you probably just need to reteach that skill. So in summary, what do you need to do? This slide has been shown already. You do need to cover everything and give sufficient time for things to be repeated and revisited in different contexts and different types of inquiry. And then hopefully you can assume that all children are secure initially. And then you do that reflection and think about who do you know is not secure. You need to think about recording those children in particular and then think about what can you do as a teacher to try and support those children to become secure. Possibly it's a small group activity within class. It may be that you can use a different subject to try, possibly PE or art, to try and help them understand that concept. Or it may be, as was mentioned, inviting them to a science club or something like that. But we really need to focus on doing everything we can to get those children to be secure. What you don't need to do is assess for working at greater depth. There are no expectations of this. In year 2 and year 6, it's only possible to say a child is secure or not secure. There are no statements to make judgments against, and it is extra work. So I would suggest that you don't need to assess for greater depth. That doesn't mean you don't need to provide challenge. That is a different thing. You can provide challenge and think about how to stretch these children, but you don't necessarily have to assess for it. Very much, everybody. I'm going to head over to the chat now and hopefully see you next week at a slightly later time of 4:30 and on a different Zoom link. So please either email us or look out on Twitter and Facebook for that. Thank you very much. Goodbye.